be kidding me. What I've got my hands on this time is a 1972 Plymouth Road Runner. And this thing is so much fun, and I've been in it for 12 seconds. You may not see much of my face in this video. It is so shaky in this car, but for good reason. Things might get out of hand. Why don't we talk about this car anymore? I mean, growing up as a millennial, a young person who was trying to find their own way in the car culture, you heard about pretty much two muscle cars, the Camaro and the Mustang. I also had really not heard much about Plymouth as a company. Turns out, Plymouth is a section of Chrysler, and it started in 1920 with their target market being the low-priced models. And they started out pretty successfully and really hit their stride during the Great Depression when, people didn't have money and wanted cheap cars. And they sold well, continuing all through the 50s. I'll point to the Belvedere as an example there. But when the people at Plymouth saw that the muscle cars and the pony cars were starting to deviate from the original core values of affordability and V8s and simplicity, Plymouth decided that they were going to try their hand at bringing the muscle car back to its roots. And after they pushed through some corporate resistance, we were blessed in 1968 with the first Plymouth Road Runner. And I can't talk about a Plymouth Road Runner without talking about the name and the graphics and the bird itself. Back in the mid-1960s, Plymouth had to pay Warner Brothers around $50,000 for the rights to call their car the Roadrunner. Hearing that Plymouth was able to license Roadrunner for $50,000 sounds like a steal, but you gotta remember $50,000 was quite a chunk of change in that day. For comparison's sake, you got the Hemi in this car as an option for only $700.
The Roadrunner was introduced with 3 engine choices, and in proper muscle car spirit, they're all V8s. There's the 383 cubic inch, the 440, and the 426 Hemi V8. Now, if you're more familiar with liters like I am than you are cubic inches, those are going to translate into 6.3, 7.2, and 7.0 liters, respectively. Even with the smallest engine, the 383, you were still getting a 335 horsepower monster. And that 426 Hemi got you 425 horsepower.
Now, Plymouth expected moderate success out of the car, but the actual sales numbers blew their minds. They expected to move 20,000 of these in the first year. They ended up over doubling that at roughly 45,000. After 1970, you see a big redesign in the front and rear fascia. Chrysler was moving all their products to a more standardized, what they called fuselage aesthetic, with a more narrowed, closed-off front, which is supposed to help with aerodynamics. Now, there is some debate within the community about whether this fuselage body style or the original is more attractive. The owner of this car, Chuck, grew up with this style Roadrunner as his first one and says that he prefers it. But of course, this is a 1972 model, and whenever we're talking about cars from the early or mid-70s, we run into the problem of emissions regulations. For the 1972 year model, we saw the delete of an option for the 426 Hemi, as well as the 440 6-barrel engine that they did offer previously. But lucky for me, this is no ordinary 1972 Roadrunner. Chuck did purchase the car from South Carolina with the original 440, but the owner also had the 440 with the 6 barrels laying around. And after a few months of driving it, he knew he had to put that engine in. After what he describes as a long, solid weekend, the 446 barrel was installed, with a few previous modifications from the previous owner. Tachometer gauges, a few other modern gauges along with the original set. Classic period pleather and plasticky dash. I mean, you gotta remember this is Plymouth. The goal here was to make an affordable muscle car. The Camaro and the Mustang had all the glitz, the chrome, the show-off bits, but this is the working man's muscle car. And I think they were successful in their goal of trying to return to the roots of the muscle car. This is no frills, this is loud and shouty, but it's not expensive and it's not unreasonable. In this example, we have the 3-speed automatic, which I think is perfect. I know there's a push to save the manuals, and believe me, I'm on board with that sentiment, but this is a car you just want to stick your one hand on the wheel and cruise and not really have to think too much, and it's perfect. I wouldn't have it any other way. So what's it like to drive? Well, you put your foot down,
And this wave of torque sends you very quickly to excessive speeds, which is fun right up until the moment you need to slow down and you realize that the brakes are less than adequate.
I'd describe the sound less as an orchestra and more of a firing range. It's loud, it's deep, it's rumbly, but only when you want it to be, only when you put your foot to the floor. If you're cruising, I mean, don't get me wrong, you know you're still rocking a big block, but not unreasonable, not obnoxious. When you start to venture into anything more than straight line speed, I can't describe it better than Chuck himself did. The steering's weird, the brakes suck. You gotta really plan ahead where you're gonna stop. It seems like you can slow down pretty fine once you get about halfway through the brake travel, but to come to a stop, you really gotta stand on it. But this car's not about stopping, it's about going. And man, does it go! Let's highlight some exterior features. First of all, no, this is not an original color. He says it is pulled from the Mopar lineup, but he can't remember which model. But it's this beautiful burnt orange that reminds me a lot of the Datsun 280 video I shot. Link above. On the hood, you've got these 440 decals on these divots. It reminds me a little bit of the modern Challenger hood, but I prefer this style. And a 1971 era stripe on the rear. I love the personality of this car. I mean, right now I'm cruising 35 down some back roads and it's perfectly civilized. I'm comfortable, the seat is a hell of a lot more comfy than my Miata seat. And I'm not stressed, I'm not nervous. I always am respectful of people's cars. I'm forever grateful that people will allow me to drive them, but I'm not nervous. This is all quite manageable. It's got power steering, so I don't have to muscle it around too much. But the other side of that coin is, man, if you want to put your foot down, she moves. I will say, under hard acceleration, it gets a little bit floaty. Like Chuck said, this is an old car, and you got to expect a little bit of that. So after getting to spend a little bit of time in this car, why are we not still talking about this car? I mean, it's good looking, it's got all the right recipe elements, and it's even got the most unique and entertaining marketing campaign I've ever heard of. I think the answer to that is twofold. One, they just weren't produced in the same numbers as the Camaro or the Mustang, and they're expensive to repair. And that, combined with Plymouth no longer being around, means resources are thin or difficult to access. And two, I think the Roadrunner's shtick was just a little too silly for some traditional muscle car people. Now, I'm willing to take my cars with a sense of humor. In fact, I prefer it. I drive a big bug-eyed Miata, so I think this is hilarious, but back in the day, the bad to the bone image was very important to people, and I think having a big yellow and blue bird on your car might have deterred some people. But that's a blessing and a curse because everybody owns a Camaro. Everybody owns a Mustang, but these are hidden gems. If you own these, you own something special, and they need to be protected at all costs.
What's up everybody? Thank you for watching the video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit the like button to let me know, and if you're new here, be sure to subscribe. I'm sorry this video took so long to get out, but I really wanted to get it right. If you have a car that you'd like me to review, be sure to email the address in the description. I've already got someone who reached out about their 124 Spider, so hopefully that video will be coming soon. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.